I welcome you all to another episode of Analytics Week Leadership Podcast. Today we have with us John Young, Chief Analytics Officer for Epsilon. To give a quick intro, John has general management responsibilities for the 150 plus member analytics consulting group at Epsilon. His responsibilities also include design and consultation on various database marketing and analytics engagements, including predictive modeling, segmentation, measurements, and profiling. John also brings thought leadership on important marketing topics. John works with companies in numerous industries, including financial services, technology, retail, healthcare, and not-for-profit. Before joining Epsilon, John was a marketing research manager at Digitas, a marketing research manager at Citizens Bank, research manager at AICPA, and an assistant economist at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. John has presented at numerous conferences, including NCDM Winter and Summer, DMA Annual, DMA Marketing Analytics, LIMRA Big Data Analytics, and Epsilon's Client Symposium. He has published in DM News, CRM Magazine's Viewpoints, Chief Marketer, Loyalty 360, and serves on the advisory board of DMA's analytics community. And John holds a BS and MS in economics from Colorado State University, Fort Collins. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Great, thanks for having me.
So, I think one thing that we enjoy are professionals from service or consulting background because of their depth and the breadth of their experience and their exposure to sort of wide variety of clients that they serve, and kind of and the other thing sort of we love about those candidates is their like these consulting firms always work on the leading edge of the technology evolution, so they always have sort of the first scoop of any sort of new flavors or new technology evolution. So on that, we're excited to have you on board, and thank you so much. So now let's start that. Why don't we delve into what is Epsilon for our members who don't know, who have not heard about your company, and what do you guys do?
Okay, yeah, that's a small question, but it's got a fairly large answer, so I'll try to be somewhat succinct. Because I've been at Epsilon a long time, and the set of services we provide is really mushroomed in that period of time. So essentially, Epsilon is a global marketing services company, and really our mission is to help clients really basically get to know their consumers better and reach them through the channels that they interact with, both online and offline channels, to really essentially hopefully create stronger emotional connections with their consumers, which in turn should lead to better business outcomes for our clients. And with us, it really all starts with the data, right? We have access to very rich information on customer profiles, understand their purchase behavior. We know what media they're interacting through, and so from all that data, we try to essentially derive meaningful insights and then leverage the powerful technology platforms that we have to activate those insights through loyalty programs, email programs, and various digital media execution. So that's essentially how we help our clients grow their businesses to better connect with their consumers. And really, when you think about it, brand marketing tomorrow means that every multi-channel moment will be addressable and personalized, based on the context and the device through which the consumer is interacting. And basically, at the end of the day, CMOs want to know, who their consumers are and how to reach them at those moments, and really, connect with them when they're most engaged, with the company. To again, lead to those better business outcomes. So Epsilon is really, in effect, in the business of helping our clients do that better.
Interesting. And thank you so much for the brief introduction on that. So why don't we discuss about your journey? So like I definitely very impressive profile. So, but it's a very brief synopsis. So why don't you sort of walk us through your journey through this through the analytics role to the now leading the analytics charge for a big company there. So love to know your perspective and your journey.
Yeah, sure. And I guess I'd say it was a kind of a very circuitous route that got me into the role I'm in today. As you mentioned at the outset, I studied economics at Colorado State. I got a bachelor's and a master's. My first job out of school, where I spent 2 years, was at the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City as an assistant economist. And that was a great job. I really enjoyed it. But without a PhD, you were essentially dead-ended there. So I did my 2 years, enjoyed the experience immensely, and then I actually took the better part of a year off, and I traveled throughout Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, which is something I'd always wanted to do. Did a solo trip, did it on a shoestring, so I didn't have much money saved at that ripe age. Then when I came back, I landed on the East Coast and took a job at a trade group in New York City, where I was essentially doing primary research and marketing research for them. And it was around that time, this would have been, probably, early 1990s, actually, where I was starting to see what was happening with database and direct marketing. And I really started to see the potential applications of a lot of the statistics and econometrics I learned in school as well as at the Federal Reserve. And my sense was this was a field that was really going to take off. At that same time, many organizations were, I guess you could say, becoming disillusioned with what their mass media spending was doing for them. They couldn't really measure the results. It was a little bit of a black box, whereas direct marketing, database marketing, you have the ability to measure what that's doing for you, and you have the ability to use data to drive how you do that. So, I did a course correction at that point. I ended up moving up to New England, took a job at Citizens Bank in Providence, Rhode Island, where, among other things, I started to build targeting models for some of their direct marketing campaigns, which continues to be, one of the fundamental applications of analytics in direct marketing, and is a big part of data-driven marketing to this day. Spent not a lot of time there, less than 2 years, and then I made the switch kind of to the other side of the table. I took a job with a digital ad agency, which is now known as Digitas. Spent a very short amount of time there, mainly because the opportunity at Epsilon presented itself, and I knew Epsilon was where I wanted to be because of all the different things they did even back then to facilitate data-driven marketing. And they, of course, had this, at the time, a very small analytic group, which I joined as a senior consultant. And that was, it'll be 22 years ago that I joined the company. Came in as a senior consultant. I kind of worked my way up the ranks. Started running the group back in 2001, and then just recently, back in April, assumed the role of the chief analytics officer, for the team, which is, as you would notice, much bigger now. Well over 100 people.
Nice.
So that was how I kind of ended up where I am today. A couple of changes along the way, but absolutely no regrets. It was at the time and continues to be a great business to be in. In fact, it's even better now with the explosion of data that we have at our fingertips to make for even more data-driven marketing.
I think congratulations on this big jump. So, and definitely quite a journey, and deserved one. So now let's talk about a bit more onto your current role, like how much you can share about. So what is Chief Analytics Officer for a company like Epsilon, and what does the role entail, or what does the job description entail?
Yeah, sure. There's really a few different things, principal things that I do. One is making sure that our large team of programmers, analysts, consultants, and statisticians is most effectively deployed across our large client base as they can be, with a view towards obviously bringing analytic best practices to their clients, which at the end of the day drive better business outcomes for their clients. If you had to boil it down to a nutshell, that's what the business we're in is all about, because if we can improve clients' business outcomes through more effective data-driven marketing, then obviously they're seeing an ROI on their spending with us, and they're going to want to continue to have us, do that kind of work for them. In addition, I also spend some of my time with some of our larger clients, and we have some very big retainer relationships with, Fortune 500, if not Fortune 100 companies. So I get a little more personally involved with those clients, doing things like helping to determine, okay, what's the right analytic roadmap for this organization based on where they are today, their marketing practices, and kind of what they aspire to get to in the future. And then, I spend a little bit of time going out with the client services teams, the sales teams here at Epsilon to help sell in the analytics services, usually in conjunction with other more substantial services, marketing services that Epsilon sells. Consistent with that, I get out and do a little bit of public speaking and also publish occasionally in some of the industry publications that are out there. And then I guess the final thing I'd remark on, and actually I don't spend as much time on this as I would like, and I think I need to, is R&D. We realize we have to continually evolve our service offerings to provide our clients what they need. It's absolutely a changing landscape out there, so we can't kind of rest on our laurels and just continue to, peruse the same toolkit that we've had for years. We need to keep adding services to be relevant to our clients and to hopefully be doing all the analytic work that they are outsourcing today.
Interesting. And so, thank you so much for that. So, now looking at a very high level, how much of your role would be out-facing versus in-facing?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So, how much of your role would be out-facing, and how much of it would be in-facing? Like dealing with clients versus dealing with Epsilon as a client.
Yeah, I'd say it's that's certainly changed over the years, and as we have gotten bigger, and given that I have general management responsibilities for the team, I'm probably spending, in the neighborhood of 75 to 80% of my time on what you would, I think, consider to be more internally focused activities around, building and growing the team, making sure, as to my previous point, we're deploying our resources effectively across our large client base, some of the R&D activities I mentioned and so forth, as opposed to the more externally facing activities where I'm actually out, with clients or prospective clients, or out, speaking at a conference, that sort of thing.
Interesting. So I think now let's talk about, because I was reading your bio, and I came to know about that you have a quite extensive experience across various industries, right? So you have been with marketing, you have with financial services, you have shown that you have something, you work on a health. So what are some of the things that you observed as like commonalities or some of the best practices that you are seeing clients do that basically you say like that's very trendy things?
It's interesting because, quite honestly, I don't think too many corporations, regardless of the industry, are kind of there yet when it comes to best practices. I would actually take a little bit of a step back on that question and say there's certain enablers that need to be in place for an organization to really be exhibiting best practices when it comes to analytics, and those enablers really are data. Obviously, it all starts with data, but there's a lot to that, right? Because you have to integrate and organize the data in a way that is readily accessible to drive data-driven marketing and do the analytics that's behind that. Obviously, you need the analytic tools, the software, if you will, to analyze that data, to produce insights and other things that companies can ultimately be acting upon. And then, of course, to do all this, you need the right people, right? And that is, as somebody that's got general management responsibilities for a shop this large, that is probably the thing that keeps me up at night, and I'm sure it does for corporations that are doing analytics internally. It's how do I find the right set of analytic practitioners, data scientists, and the like that you really need to look at the data, run the tools to produce the insights that ultimately can be leveraged to drive better business outcomes. So I view those as the key enablers of best practices, and you really need to have those components in place before you can be doing things like, say, multi-channel
Right.
attribution, which would be one example of a best practice in terms of kind of the measurement and optimization side of the business, but one that, frankly, I think most organizations continue to struggle with, particularly those that have very complex and fragmented marketing activities. But again, if you've taken the time and spent the money to invest in those enablers, you're going to put yourself in a position where you can be achieving those analytic best practices, whatever they might be.
Interesting. Interesting. So definitely, I would go on a people. I think that's a very good point that you shared about getting the right team and sort of putting it in place. So I'll go over that very soon. So now I think definitely want to have your perspective on, like, we are seeing nowadays bunch of lingos cropping up. So chief data officer, data, chief data scientist, chief analytics officer. So I want definitely love to have your perspective on what do you like. What's your lens on who is a chief analytics officer, who is chief data officer, and like how do you demarcate these three categories, if at all?
Yeah, it's it's interesting because not too many years ago you would have been hard pressed to find many people with these titles out
Right.
there. But as we all know today, these titles are certainly becoming more and more common. And I really think that's a reflection of the fact that more and more companies are realizing the power in data and the ability to leverage that data to do data-driven marketing, and to really be able to do that, back to the kind of the talent aspect of the enablers, you need the right people in place, and particularly larger organizations, for example, are making the investments in chief data officers, chief analytic officers to come in and create the environment, put in place the set of tools, and build the teams that are required to truly achieve data-driven marketing and give their organizations a real competitive advantage. I think there is still some confusion out there, which will persist for a while, around what is the role of the CDO versus the CAO. Chief
Mm.
data scientist is not a role I see a lot of, but I think we will see more and more of that as the importance of that particular type of analytic talent becomes increasingly obvious. But it might be a bit of an oversimplification of Vishal, but I almost view the chief analytic officer as a client or a customer of the chief data officer, because the chief data officer, as the title kind of implies, is
Mm.
responsible for all the bringing together and the governance of the data within the organization to put the organization in a position to become more data driven, and that is by far as far from being a trivial task, particularly for organizations that have very disparate, large sources of data all over the organization. It takes a lot to put that together.
Right.
But once you have, then the chief analytics officer and his or her organization obviously are going to be in a much better position to achieve the potential that they can deliver for the organization. So I think the
Mm.
two roles, CDO and CAO, are highly complementary. And the sooner organizations realize that and organize themselves in a way that those two entities and organizations can work more effectively together, the greater the return they're going to get on their data and analytic investments.
Interesting, interesting. Definitely. Thank you so much for putting a light on that. So now let's go over your current role. So I think your engagements. So we see, and we have been talking to a bunch of people who have been into chief analytics officer roles, and they have. I think one thing that we have seen is their depth and the breadth of their experience, and kind of their day to day activities. So love to know what are uh, some of the depth and breadth of the decisions that you have that you got to do as a chief analytics officer for a company.
Yeah, well, and I think the answer to that varies depending on what kind of organization that you're in, because I would answer that differently. Say if I was a
Mm.
chief analytic officer, say of a big financial services company, but I'm on the other side of the table, right? We're
Right.
we're an analytic service provider, so um, I think the answer to that question relates pretty highly back to kind of the delineation of my roles and responsibilities, and those I think can be broken into internal and externally facing sort of responsibilities. And internally, it's all about acquiring and retaining the right team of individuals, again, programmers, analysts, statisticians, and consultants that can deliver the range of work and analytic best practices our clients need to truly take their marketing programs to the next level. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's finding the right people, there's interviewing them, bringing them in, obviously creating an environment where they can get up in the morning and feel somewhat excited at least about what they're going to do that day at work, because believe me, people in this business have options, and if you're not challenging them with the right types of assignments, they'll go to one of your competitors. So we're constantly trying to create an environment here where people are challenged. They're facing new and different business problems, business and marketing problems from the different clients we work with. And we have a big advantage there because we work across so many different industries and work with so many different clients. It gives our associates, as we call them at Epsilon, our employees, the opportunity to experience a whole lot of different things over time, because they can cycle from one account to the next. Whereas if you were in a large corporation, I think the range of things you get exposed to is going to be a little more limited. So a lot of it, a lot of what I do is internally focused around creating that right environment where people are challenged and growing and advancing, and they want to stick around, and they're bringing their A game sort of every day.
Right.
And training is another aspect of making that happen. But then there's the kind of the analytic toolkit, as we call it. We actually have here at Epsilon what we call the Insider's Guide to ACG, which is essentially a listing of all the different analytics services that we provide our clients. And again, we're constantly updating that, expanding that to make sure we have the full range of services we need to help our clients address the different challenges they have. So as I alluded to a little earlier, a little bit of R&D goes into that. And we have to make sure we carve out enough time among the right people within our team to drive those R&D efforts so we can add to that toolkit. So that's kind of the running the business aspect, and by the way, trying to do it profitably.
Right.
Hitting budgets on projects and timelines and so forth. We don't have a blank check here, but then there's the external aspects, which are also important, and I enjoy just as much, even if I don't spend quite as much time on those as I used to. And that's there's no substitute for getting out and sitting down with a client, sitting down across the table, and understanding what is it that keeps them up at night. What is keeping them from achieving better results in their marketing programs, and then helping them architect the analytic solutions that are truly going to drive significant incremental gains in those marketing programs. To me, that's maybe the most gratifying part of the job, is when we conceive and then execute the right analytics, and then work with the client. Importantly, and this is something that's often overlooked, work with the client to make sure they fully execute on the analytics, because there's still a lot of barriers out there to the execution of analytics, to see the kind of results that can bring for the client, and to in fact be, as part of the engagement, measuring on the back end what those analytic tools are doing in terms of driving incremental business results. That's very gratifying, because you can see that you're having an impact on the business, and you're making your clients look good.
Right.
So they're happy, and they keep coming back. They want to do more because, again, they see the ROI in the activities that they're doing, with us.
Interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that. So I think one more thing that I definitely want your perspective on. So as I said that as a service provider, the cool thing is that you always have to work on the next big thing. You always have, so that the culture itself allows for risk taking. The culture allows for sort of adoption of these capabilities, any sort of new up and coming sort of trends. But on the flip side, the clients that require these services are totally on the other side of the aisle. So they are uh, not very often the risk takers. They are sort of on the lagging edge many times for these adoptions. So what are some of the challenges that you see very common when you deal with say clients of Epsilon, or sort of um, like your clients that you deal with?
Well, I think to me the biggest challenge is, and I mentioned it a minute ago, is the organizations we work with taking the steps they need to be truly data driven. I talked earlier about the enablers that need to be in place to bring about true data driven marketing, and those are critical, but and they're a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. And the thing that you need to accomplish along with that, and this starts to get into some of the cultural aspects of implementing analytics to become more data driven, is that there's many, if not most organizations out there, you have a lot of people that are responsible for running the various business and marketing processes, and they're used to doing things a certain way, and in many, if not most cases, that is a non-data driven way of doing things.
Right.
And so, it can be difficult to get the analytics fully deployed because it's just not necessarily consistent with how they've done things, in the past. So, I think you got to take baby steps in many situations to overcome these challenges. And, one of the things I very strongly believe is that the best way to start for an organization that really is kind of at ground zero and not at all data driven today is you got to look at the quick wins out there, the low hanging fruit, and go out there and do the things that can deliver some quick results, because then that's how you're going to start to get noticed within the organization. The people that are more logical and pragmatic are going to see that. They're going to wake up to the fact that, hey, data driven marketing, it's achievable, it's real, and if you do it right, you can be rewarded with much better business outcomes. And then those people that are a little more resistant to change, culturally they're not ready for it, they're eventually going to fall into line because they're going to see it be, frankly, ridiculous to kind of resist it any longer. And in fact, in some cases, you might be jeopardizing your job if you don't try to embrace the analytics that can truly make you more successful in your business.
Right. I think that's a very valid point, and I think you are pretty much hopping on one of the most pressing issue, which is the culture, right? So it's very difficult to get businesses adapt these and the culture is the biggest inhibitor of any of these fundamental changes, and I think very well said on the quick wins and baby steps. I think that's super relevant, and thank you definitely for sharing that. So now let's, I think let's on the same point, right? So what, like, if I'm a business, right, and definitely culture has been the issue. I know the way I've been doing business now, sort of I've been told to do there's something called data driven, and definitely it's not compliant to my current business practices. So what are some of the quick wins, or some of the easy steps that you think some of the businesses could take, which is like a, in a way, let me flip this question in a different direction, that what are some of the best practices that you have seen consistent, that businesses readily chew as, like, they can do that and deliver results, and that pretty much pave way for the bigger problem called like cultural changes.
To me, one of the easiest kind of quick wins is making sure targeting or predictive modeling is used to determine who the audience should be for a given direct marketing campaign. There's still many organizations out there that do it in a much less scientific manner, but it's relatively easy, if you have the right data, to create a model that identifies which prospects or customers are most likely to exhibit some desired behavior. So for example, buy more of your products and services, right? So you develop those models with data that can be pretty easily obtained, and then you work with the marketers that run those campaigns. It's pretty relatively straightforward to implement a predictive model. You can do it in a way where you can show them in a head-to-head fashion how did this campaign perform using this predictive model versus a business as usual approach to targeting. Then you do that, you let the campaign run, and then on the back end you measure the results. Almost invariably you're going to see much better results with the marketing that was driven by the model. So again, this creates a win, creates some positive momentum, and it starts to build more of a groundswell for analytics and more of an appetite for data-driven marketing. And then that's, when the organization, either doing the work themselves or partnering with a company like Epsilon, can start to embrace and do more analytics. And, on the topic of best practices, I guess a couple of examples of some things that are going on out there more recently, some kind of hot topics, if you will, is, you've certainly heard about multi-channel attribution. This is garnering and will continue to garner a lot of attention because as marketing programs become more complex, more fragmented, there's more marketing channels to market through, including social media platforms. It becomes very difficult to determine how all the various pieces in the marketing mix are performing. In other words, how effective is your marketing spend across all these different channels and different marketing activities? Well, if you truly best practices companies are starting to figure out kind of the multi-channel attribution puzzle. I think very few have. It's very difficult to do. But if you do it effectively, you're going to end up with much more accurate measurement results that give you a much cleaner understanding of how, again, are all the disparate marketing activities that you're using truly driving your business and marketing results, so that you in turn can optimize that marketing spend. That's an area that deserves and will continue to get a lot of attention. A somewhat different example would be some of the work we see being done with unstructured data. You probably heard that 80% of the big data out there is unstructured data. I'm talking about things like, call center logs, customer emails, chat sessions on websites, a variety of text data, which historically is gone either unused or under leveraged because there's never been a good way to kind of understand that data without, short of manually trying to go through it, which when you're dealing with, hundreds of thousands or millions of records of that data becomes impossible. So there's been advances in text mining, natural language processing and the like over the last several years that have enabled companies to mine that data, essentially turn that unstructured data into structured data so they can better understand, okay, well, what are our customers, our consumers thinking about? What is important to them? How do they feel about my organization? Are they happy with me, unhappy? So that you can learn from that data and then use that learning to adjust your marketing activities. We've even taken some of that data, turned it into structured data, and augmented data that, little data that we've traditionally used for predictive models, and improve the effectiveness of those predictive models by layering in that unstructured data. So there's a lot of interesting things that can be done with that data. And, again, I think most organizations, if they're doing anything at all with that kind of data today, they're just starting to scratch the surface.
Interesting.
Definitely some best practices starting to emerge there, and we'll see more of that.
Nice. So now let's talk about your clients a bit, right? So on the client side, right? So when is the right time that some business should engage with a company or service provider? Like it's almost I'm almost going in a direction of build versus buy, or like when is a good time to that I say, okay, I should build these capabilities versus I should sort of get help. So what are some of the good indicators that that businesses should understand or sort of gauge before saying, okay, let me make a few phone calls?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's, I think, one that more and more organizations are struggling with. And certainly the trend we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is, whereas say 10 years ago, the way in which we interacted with our clients was they basically outsourced all their analytics to us. They had little to no in-house analytic capability. I think what's happened over time is organizations have increasingly realized the competitive advantage that can be gained from applying analytics to their marketing and broader business activities. And so some organizations have come to the conclusion that this stuff is too mission critical to trust it to a third party. And that kind of became the tipping point for deciding they were going to build rather than keep buying the capability. And that's great. And there's many big organizations where our relationship with them evolved as they made that kind of transformation, and we helped them build out the analytic capability. In some cases, we help them even interview people to hire to bring into their in-house teams. I think a big determinant of whether it makes sense to buy or build is you got to look at the scale of the marketing activities to which the marketing analytics will be applied. And all things being equal, the larger the scale, i.e. the size of the company typically getting bigger, it makes more sense to build the capabilities in-house and in a decreasing fashion relying outside service providers. Maybe you just do it for niche services, some of the more advanced analytics that maybe your internal team isn't ready to take on yet. You can always operate in a hybrid model. So I think generally speaking, larger companies are going to be well served by insourcing analytics, whereas smaller companies, where it's harder to kind of make the business case for having any kind of substantial in-house team, are going to be better served by outsourcing the work.
Interesting. And I think so. One thing that definitely with that we have seen many of the service providers they end up doing, and I think you briefly touched. I'm not sure if that's the point, but creating kind of a center of excellence, and because they're already sort of serving a lot of interesting clients with their interesting problems, and many times sort of it's almost like templatize a bunch of batch and sort of build those capabilities and then sort of outsource those capabilities or the engine, so as to speak, that the other businesses could sort of deploy their data and you provide them the models or whatever the structure. Is Epsilon up like doing that, or like what's your take on that? Like, is that one of the things that's coming along, or it's already out?
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand the question. Are you essentially referring to situations where a company would basically just turn over their data for the purposes of letting a third party run their analytics? Is that kind of what you're referring to, or?
Right. So because I think because many of the service providers they deal with various interesting business problems, right? And they end up sort of they already have a center of excellence. Now building that capability and then sort of selling that capability to clients, saying, okay, take this engine and it can do stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it's partly what you're getting at is efficiencies and economies of scale, so to
Right.
speak. Because you do need to buy hardware and software to run the analytics, right? And so,
Right.
back to my previous point, if there's not enough marketing activity to which you'd apply the marketing analytics, it's tougher to justify the investments in the hardware and the software and the staff. It makes more sense to outsource it, to a service provider like an Epsilon, where we think in our case, built arguably a center of excellence. We have, say, a full range of modeling techniques we can use against a variety of different types of data to build different types of models for organizations to support their marketing. So, I think there's definitely has been and will continue to be a strong case for, outsourcing the analytics and letting, somebody that focuses on that work, that has a center of excellence in that area, do the work, as opposed to trying to build it in-house.
Interesting. So now let's come over to the people side of the problem. So building a team. I think you briefly touched in the start of the interview. what are some of the best practices that you have seen, or like, for building a good team?
Boy, I wish I had some good secrets there. I think it's still a work in progress for us. You know, I mean, if part of the question is what are we looking for in the people we bring in to try to continue to be successful in this business, there's a few things that stand out. One is obviously that the people have the technical and the quantitative skills to do the range of analytic work uh, that is needed to apply to clients, marketing programs. I think with that comes, uh, just people that have, and this is more of an innate thing versus something you learn through school, is they have a good analytic thought process, right? They can look at a business, an industry, a company, its products and services, its competitors, its consumers, and really understand, okay, how can analytics and the different analytic techniques we have be applied to this business to essentially help this business run more effectively and efficiently? So it's that kind of, I guess, more left brain thinking, I guess, than anything. So those two things I just described are really more of the left brain, but more and more so, we need people that are also uh, right brain as well. And here I'm starting to refer more to the ability to synthesize analytic findings, to draw insights from data and analytics that are being run, and socialize those findings with what often can be a diverse audience of clients, some that are, don't get the stuff at all versus others that are, a little more savvy and you can have more in-depth conversation with. But the ability to really synthesize what the analytics are telling us and do it in a way, almost a storytelling way, that the client is not only going to understand, but they're going to get excited about the power of this analytics and what it can do for the business. Um, those kind of communication skills and interaction skills with the client are becoming increasingly important. And it gets back to my earlier point about helping to break down some of the barriers to the deployment of analytics, because at the end of the day, you can do the best analytics out there, but if the clients don't understand the analytics and see how, when it's applied to their business, it's going to improve their business outcomes, the results are just going to sit on a shelf somewhere and not be used. So increasingly, we are looking for people that kind of can wear both hats, if you will. I mean, to me, those are going to be the ingredients of a successful analytic practitioner or data scientist in the long term.
Interesting.
So again, I think you can't overemphasize those communication skills along with the traditional quantitative and analytical skills that people tend to more associate with analytic professionals.
Interesting. I think couldn't have been said any better on that. So now let's talk about the aspiring chief analytics officers of the future, whatever that means. So what are some of the top three, or more or less, qualities that you think tomorrow's leader, or aspiring sort of leader, should possess for these kind of chief analytics roles?
Really, I think in a nutshell, it comes down to the characteristics we just discussed. I mean, again, you need to be a strong left brain and right brain person. In addition to those core analytical underpinnings, which, by the way, also increasingly with big data include programming skills and the ability to get around very large and disparate data sets in a way that you can uh, make a distinction between noise, because there's a lot of noisy data out there that's not valuable, versus data that is valuable and can produce meaningful signals that can be leveraged to, again, affect better marketing outcomes. So those kind of programming skills are becoming increasingly important with the advent of big data to go along with, again, the traditional technical and analytic skills we talked about. But then again, the ability to synthesize this stuff and communicate it in a way with a diverse clientele that they get it and more importantly, then want to act on the findings and continue to increase the amount of analytics that's being applied to their business. Those, to me, are what are going to make for a successful analytic leader over time. And then, oh, by the way, they not only have to be able to do all those things, but they have to be able to lead, mentor, train, nurture, teams, which can include people right out of college that are very green and need, a lot of hand holding and a lot of development. Because you're only as good as the team underneath you, right? So that's why it's critical to invest the time and care and feeding into the analytic team that is doing all the work that's making all this possible.
Interesting. No, I think definitely well said. So now let's talk about a bunch of. So I think there has been a lot of debate with this uprising of data and analytics capability. Is it's killing the art in a business, and I think it's more of a more philosophical point of view that now having more analytics driven, you are more science than art somehow. Like what is your take on that philosophical that businesses always used to sort of thrive on their competitive edge, which has been more on the art side. But are these analytics differentiations pushing them to be more science than art? And sort of like, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not going to be one or the other. Business is always going to be a mix of art and science in terms of how it's run. I think what you're seeing, we'll continue to see will be the shift to emphasize more the science over the art, namely the data science, right? And the ability to leverage the data in a scientific manner to affect better business outcomes. And again, to the extent that organizations, particularly the people in power at these organizations, namely the C-suite, as they come to see how running the business based more on the data and the data science can produce those better outcomes versus maybe a more seat of the pants sort of artful way of running the business. They realize they have a duty to their shareholders to produce maximum shareholder return, right? And to the extent that data-driven marketing increases revenue, increases profitability, it's going to drive higher shareholder value. And the C-suite and on down is going to embrace more the scientific way of running a business versus the art way of running the business. But again, it will always be a blend of the two. I think it'll just move more into the heavier mix of the science behind the running the business.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing your point of view. So I think I don't have anything else, and thank you so much for sharing your candid thoughts. So any other parting thought that you have for our community and for anyone watching this podcast?
Well, I guess I'd wrap it up, Vishal, by saying, this business is just so exciting. I mean, I had no idea when I got into this line of work over 20 years ago that it would evolve to what it has today. I mean, I was happy with where it was 20 years ago and the far more limited things we were doing then, because, again, I saw the power of that and what it could do for companies. But, the sky's the limit in this business, so particularly for those younger people out there that are, say, still in school or early in their careers, those that have the inclination and the abilities, the capabilities we've talked about throughout this discussion to do this kind of work, I would strongly encourage them to consider, changing the course of their career to get into this kind of work because, again, the sky's going to be the limit, and there's just a great and will continue to be a great future in this business.
Interesting. With that, thank you so much, John. Again, thank you so much for being very candid and sharing some of the interesting perspective from your lens, from Epsilon's lens, from marketing analytics lens. And I think this will be a very useful session. So, love to have you on board again in some time to discuss your journey. And thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, Vishal. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
thank
it.
you. Yeah,
Take
bye.
care.
I thought I I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a